everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lawfully Told. I'm Shirani Ranganatha, and today I'm talking with Archana, a law student at the University of Texas School of Law, who's here to give us the inside scoop on what's it's really like to study law. So first, let's go back to the beginning because no one just randomly ends up in law school. There's always a story behind it. So, what inspired you to go into law?
First of all, congratulations on your first episode. In your intro, you said another episode, but I'm very honored to be the first episode.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm really honored that you're having me on here. Um, and it's funny you said that nobody randomly goes into law because if there is someone that randomly goes into law, it might be me. I certainly didn't plan this out the way that some people very meticulously plan to go into law school. Actually, in college and in high school, I was pretty pre-med focused. And then in college, I actually was a biology major and then I did all the prerequisites. And so I was pretty set on going to med school at the beginning of college. But then, sort of throughout my time in college, I had second thoughts about that. I really enjoyed the science I was learning, but I wasn't sure if medicine as a profession was right for me. And then at the end of my 4 years, I didn't feel ready to just straight away apply to med school and do that path because I was a little unsure. So I took a gap year, and in that first semester, I had set up a internship opportunity. So I decided to do a public policy internship in DC. And in that internship, I interacted with a lot of lawyers. DC is full of lawyers, and that kind of wasn't really a career path that was ever exposed to me. There's no lawyers in my family. There's nobody that I really know personally that is a lawyer. So I didn't even think it was a career path. But I double majored in my undergrad. I was a biology major and also a philosophy major. And a lot of people who do philosophy as their major end up going to law school. So I was like, well, it's not too far out of reach for me. And it was something I became really interested in. So I thought, why not just apply and see what happens? So I studied for the LSAT, which my philosophy degree really helped me with. I applied, or I took the LSAT, then applied, got in, and then I kind of decided to go. I was like, okay, this seems like a good career path. The more I learned about the career, the more I was like, I think it might be the right one for me. But I still wasn't like 200% sure, Sharanya, until I attended my first day of law school. And then I was like, oh, I think I definitely made the right choice. But there was always that doubt because it was just so unknown to me.
That's a great answer. I know a lot of people who struggle between two paths, and that's just so awesome that there's another person who also went through that journey. You said how you were choosing between pre-med and all that. Can you go into more depth? Like, did you think about doing anything else before choosing law?
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people that I like a lot of different things. And interestingly enough, a lot of the lawyers I've met are like that, or law students. Like, law school is a place where there's a lot of personalities like that, where you just are interested in a lot of different things, know about a lot of different things, have like different pasts, different talents. And that was kind of always me. Like, I really liked artistic things. I really liked math, science, but also like reading, writing, language arts, like literary analysis. So I don't know, like my undergrad degree was also quite varied too. So I double majored in biology and philosophy, and then I minored in anthropology. And I wanted to also minor in environmental science. So I took a lot of classes there, but I didn't end up putting it on my degree. So it's like I just studied a lot of different things, which it's interesting. I personally believe that no matter what personality or learning style you have, you can be very successful in whatever field or career you choose for yourself. That being said, certain career fields tend to attract certain personalities. And I found that the pre-med career and the medical career tended to attract personalities that are very narrowly focused. So they like know what they want and how to get there. And then the law career tends to attract people that don't necessarily have that very specific focus. And I also don't think I don't think it's 100% people. I think like what I'm trying to say is I think the way those institutions are set up, they sort of force people into those molds. So I know plenty of pre-med students or that are now in medical school or graduating medical school that are varied people that like a lot of different things, but what that process asks of you is to like really narrow your focus down in your career and in what you're studying. And in law, what I came to learn is it's more open than most fields. Like you have the ability to switch practice areas and stuff like that way later in your career than in other places with relatively less effort. So, um, sorry, what was your original question?
No, exactly. You already answered it. I was just asking, did you think about something else before
Yeah, I
you?
thought about a lot of different things. Like I'm one of those people that when I was a kid and people are like, what do you want to be? I was like, I want to be everything. I want to do everything. So, I never really saw myself in like any specific career. I could see myself in every career. So it's just interesting, the choices we end up making and the places we go.
Yeah, that's amazing. But one of the things I am most curious about is what law school is like. So, on that note, what surprised you the most when you started law school? Anything that totally caught you off guard?
Yeah, lots of things. Well, first of all, like the way you learn is different from any other type of learning I'd ever experienced in my life. And like I've studied a variety of different things. So I thought up until that point that I knew how to learn. But law school, like they like to say, it's all about training your brain, like training you to think like a lawyer. Sometimes people think that when you go to law school, you learn specific laws, like, oh, you learn all of the federal laws or all of the state laws. It's really not like that. You might take an environmental course in which you do learn specific statutes, but it really depends on the type of, and by statutes, I mean laws, but it really depends on the type of subject you're studying, and those are more advanced subjects. What they are really training you to do is like reshape how your brain thinks about certain things. And it was just, it felt so hard for me to grasp. Um, like in the LSAT, they make you do these like logic puzzles and questions, and I don't think it directly it's supposed to like somewhat like sub proxy or substitute the type of learning you do in law school, but I don't think it does exactly. In law school, you're reading these like texts, and you're supposed to create something concrete and like substantial out of something nebulous and like fuzzy. And it's like after you do it for a while, you start to see the same types of arguments. And then, oh, you know that torts works this way, and you know that this part of the law mirrors that part of the law, and you know that if you see this indicator, then you should start thinking about the problem that way. But if you just have no idea, they're all just words to you. And then you're like, oh, I think what they're trying to say is this. And you say something in class, but you just don't know unless you know. And I feel like I feel like I rambled a little bit when saying that, but that's just kind of how I feel. Like you are lost a little bit when it comes to learning. Like I'll give you an example. In the classes I did really well in are classes where I felt I could practice the skill. So in the first year curriculum, it's set across the entire country. Everyone learns the same subjects first year, more or less. You learn property law, torts, civil procedure, constitutional law, criminal law, and my gosh, there's six subjects: property, torts, civil procedure, criminal law, constitutional law, and something really important that I'm forgetting.
No problem.
But the classes I did really well in were torts, property, and civil procedure. And these are seen, oh, contracts. I don't think I said that. Contracts is the sixth subject. I did well in contracts, civil procedure, um, and torts, and property law because the way those were taught to me was very problem based. So they would be like, okay, this is sort of like in property, there's certain rules for property, and then you can calculate the answer. And in contracts, um, the way our professor taught it is there's like a lot of different rules. And they're kind of more concrete rules. Same in civil procedure. So if you're given practice problems, you can drill those problems until you actually learn it and you're able to perform it on the exam because the exams are all um like skill based. Like you have to know the law and then apply the law. But then for constitutional law and criminal law, it's more like there's less rules, it's more analysis. And for me, I make I'm one of those people that like make creative arguments because that's just how my brain thinks. And I didn't do as well on those exams because I didn't know like what they expected of me. What does it mean to do well in criminal law? I don't know. I learned the same law as my classmates. I learned it just as well, and I applied it in the way that I thought it was supposed to be applied. But if you just don't know exactly how you're supposed to think about something, it's really good that you're bringing in this fresh creativity and that'll take you very far as a lawyer. But you may not do well in law school, or you'll do just fine, but you may not do as well as you hope because you're not regurgitating the same arguments that people are expecting from you. And that can be discouraging. Like going in with no bearing can be a little bit discouraging because you notice the difference with your classmates.
That's so interesting because like in the real world, we see so many perspectives, so many new perspectives. And in law school, that's even more exemplified because everyone's coming together doing the same problem multiple different ways. Yeah, that's so interesting. But law school has a reputation for being super intense. How do you stay on top of everything without totally burning out?
The short answer is there's no way to stay on top of everything. Yeah, like I mean, so you, um, for the audience, I don't know if they know, but Sharanya is also a very young entrepreneurial person, so she juggles a lot of things. So, like, would you say, I don't know, maybe you would say this, but I remember when I was juggling a lot of things too when I was younger, I wouldn't say I was on top of everything at the same time. I don't know if you feel that's true, but I think in law school that's true. You can't be on top of everything at the same level at the same time. So, maybe you have a deadline coming up in one area, so you put more focus on that and you have to let this other thing slip a little bit. And then that thing has a deadline. So you let this go and you go there and you constantly feel like you're putting out fires a little bit and it is exhausting. But I think I'm really glad you used the phrasing like without burning out because to me that's really important. I think other some students it's interesting. Some students don't take that as being that important. Um, well, actually, I'll come back to that point. But first, I'll just talk about what I do. Like, I just check in with myself. Before I went into law school, I made sure to take the time to really get to know myself and, figure out what my, sense of fulfillment, motivation, well-restedness, wellness, health. I like really got in tune with myself. And then in law school, that really helps because then when you feel yourself, you know, close to burning out or you feel like, oh, I need a break, it's really important to just take a break. And it's really hard to do that because it seems like everything is like really urgent and there's no way. But if you prioritize that, you'll find a way. And yes, it might mean that you're not as prepared for that class as you hoped, but you have to figure out what's more worth it to you. And to me, my health and my sense of mental wellness are more worth it to me because it's about the long game. I have to get through law school and feel good about it. And I have to start my journey as a lawyer and develop a good sense of work-life balance. So those are all things that are important to me. And work-life balance starts in law school, actually. The people that think that they can just grind through law school and they will do have work-life balance later, that is mindset is what you're practicing. So it actually becomes really hard the minute you start a job to just suddenly like decide that you're going to have a work-life separation. It often takes like some sort of health scare, like some sort of change in somebody's life to start that. And that's, you don't want to let it get that stage. But what I was gonna say is, um, what grade are you in, Sharnya, again?
I'm going to ninth grade.
Right? Okay, so what you might find in high school, because I remember being in ninth grade and people were like starting to not sleep and they'd be like, oh, like I just, we had this assignment, so I just like stayed up till 4 and like I did it, or I just stayed up all night and then I'm gonna crash when I get home. And I did it a couple times too, even though it wasn't 100% necessary, but maybe I procrastinated a little. But in law school, it's unfair, but there are people that just biologically need less sleep or they need less food, and their just biological needs are less, and that gives them a real advantage because they can put in more hours than you without burning out.
Mm.
But and that's just like the cards you have to take. So there's some people that set the bar like that, and because everybody's graded on a curve, there's plenty of other people that maybe actually do need a lot of sleep, but they're willing to sacrifice it um, to get to that level. And maybe that's fine. It really depends on the individual person. But the older I grow, the more I prioritize sleep and eating and taking time to eat. I remember one of the things that shocked me was that, especially in my second year, like this past year,
Mm.
people didn't care if I got to eat lunch or not. Like people would schedule meetings during the lunch hour and they'd be like, "Oh, we have a free like sliver of time." And that was really frustrating because I think that people should be eating their lunch. But it's that sort of thing that like you notice that your peers might not value it as much. So you kind of have to make a conscious decision and it might make you stick out a little bit. But if you decide that's important to you, then, you know,
Mhm. Yeah, that's inspiring because especially now since there's so much competition, especially in our area, there's so much competition. It's like refreshing to see someone being like, it's okay to prioritize yourself in times of need. Okay, the next question is kind of aligned towards this. What's been your biggest challenge in law school and how did you deal with it?
hmm, I think I think my biggest challenge has been like mental, emotional. Like I went to law school to learn more about legal institutions and like social institutions. Actually, like, so I mentioned going to DC and that's why I applied to law school, but it's actually like a mixture of different things. And one of the major things was the 2022 Dobbs decision had just come out, which basically said that abortion is not a federally protected right. And so states like Texas put in really strict anti-abortion laws. And um, at that time, I felt that loss very personally, and I was like, this is a bodily autonomy is something that's really important to me, and it felt like I could go to law school and learn a skill that could then allow me to do a lot of good in the world. And so that was another reason why I applied. And the more I learn about the law, I remember sitting in my constitutional law class the spring of my first year and learning about all of this Supreme Court precedent, like all of these past decisions that have shaped the framework of things like disability law, like the ADA,
Mm.
American with Disabilities Act, and the 14th Amendment and like the Equal Protection Clause and all of those parts of the Constitution and how they're like interpreted. I remember like learning all this stuff and feeling quite discouraged because I had held out this hope that learning more about that would make me feel like, oh, this is how the Constitution is meant to be upholded, but the political climate we're in today, they're just not doing that justice. But what I actually learned was that there's always been this injustice done via the Constitution. And that was very disheartening for me to sort of grapple with. And I felt that like loss um, of hope very personally. I wouldn't say I've lost all hope, but I had sort of thought that the law and the law alone was like something that I held it in very high esteem. Um, and then I don't think I held the law and Lady Justice in as high esteem after that. It did change me a lot. So dealing with that, like mentally and emotionally, and then especially this past year, a lot of my coursework has felt irrelevant, which is sad to say. But for example, in my last semester, I was in an administrative law course, which deals with how like the federal executive branch operates. And half of the like executive branch has been like dismantled. Maybe not half, but like all of these agencies have been dismantled by the current political administration. So it just felt like a little silly to sit here and talk about how the Social Security Administration is supposed to function and how all of this stuff is supposed to happen when it has been proven fairly easy to just decide that we don't want to do any of that. So I think dealing with that and still being in school and having to show up every day and having to deal with the new craziness that occurs every day and reading the news and just having to like go to that 3 p.m. class and read for it anyway and just be a good student anyway, that has been really difficult.
This resonates with me especially deeply because I'm in this program called Youth in Government. It's where you make mock laws. And my law this year was about abortion because I again feel very strongly about you're your own person and nobody gets to make that decision. So seeing someone else have the same passion is really again inspiring. And now I'm going to talk about one of the reasons that I look forward to going to school or going anywhere is spending time with my friends and having an established community. I would assume it's the same in law school. So, how important has community or friendship been in your law school experience?
It's been so important. So I feel like there's two levels of community. There's like my immediate family that they live in a different town than where my law school is. So they can't be there for me. But I would like lump them in with my non-law school community. So like the people that are not associated with it in any way, it's really important to have people that are not in your little bubble because when you just get fed up with all of the craziness that's going on in your bubble, you need to be able to talk to someone that's not going through it and be like, oh, there is life outside of law school. Like other people are doing things, like people have different things going on in their life. I'm not just a law student, I'm also a human being. That's like a very important thing to keep reminding yourself. But also my law school community, when I went into law school, I didn't know anybody, and now I have like a really solid group of people that I know that I can trust and rely on, and I feel like that we're going to be lifelong friends and colleagues, and that like there's a like I think that's just invaluable. And I made those friends because I'm a public interest law student, which means that there's like different types of law and the people that are more interested in public service, like doing legal services for people that can't pay as much or for nonprofits or things like that. We're all called public interest law students or public service law students. And it takes a certain kind of like dedication to the cause that people share to social justice, I feel like. So when you enter that organization in your school, you tend to find a lot of community there because you feel similarly about a lot of the issues that are being talked about in your classes or things that you have to just deal with in the school. And also, this past year, I was the president of our APALSA. So that's the Asian Pacific American Law Student Association. And most law schools will have affinity organizations for like ethnic affinity groups, or there's Outlaw, which is the LGBTQ plus affinity group. So there's a lots of groups like that, and I found my time with the Pulsar really fulfilling. I just got to like my 1L year, so that means my first year we got like 1L, 2L, 3L. So my 1L year there wasn't a lot of community. there weren't like Asian. I was one thing you asked what one thing I was shocked by, and I was shocked by how overwhelmingly white and male law school is. Because I go to UT Austin, and I know that UT Austin's undergrad population is extremely diverse. So for some reason, I expected that to be true of law school, but law school as a whole is overwhelmingly white and male, and I saw that represented in my law school. So that was something that shocked me. So there's not a lot of us like minority students around. So I felt it was important that we created community. But my first year, I didn't feel like that community was really created. So I felt it was really important to do that. And so that's why I ran for this position, and I put a lot of work into generating that community. And I feel really proud that not only did I feel like I made a place, and along with my team, I made a place for other people to find that kind of community. I also found some of my really good friends, and I found a couple of friends in particular that I think are going to be my friends for the rest of my life through that community as well. So that is like it's just really important to be plugged into your school. Some students I think aren't as plugged in, and that's fine if you have a really strong like support network. Like maybe you live in the same town as your school, and or like there's a lot of non-traditional students or people that have like families, like children and like spouses or whatever. That makes sense. But if you don't really have anyone, I'd say it's like just really important to try and find that community.
You mentioned how law school is white male majority. What advice would you give to someone who's doubting the law school experience because of that exact reason?
Um, I was a little lucky in a lot of ways. There's a lot of problems going in like blind and not knowing anything. Like there's a lot you don't know, but you also don't know like what the struggles are. So you don't have to like anticipate it in a negative way. Um, in a lot of ways, it made me carefree before I started law school. Like I just didn't know. But I would say that hmm, I don't know. I think you did you ask like oh like how to handle it, or no, you asked something else.
Yeah, how to handle it and someone's feeling alone or overwhelmed or intimidated by that sort of population or anything in general, to be honest.
Yeah, I would say that like I think it's just important to find friends that think like you. Like, I wouldn't say create an echo chamber, and law school is really good at making sure, well, I don't know what really good, but law school tries to make sure that you don't create an echo chamber. So classes tend to be adversarial, which means one person raises their hand and says like, well, I think this is what that means, and this is the argument you can make. And another person says, actually, that's a terrible argument to make. Here's a better argument to make, and this is how you should analyze this. And that's how it's set up so that people can sort of have these discussions in class. And while in theory that sharpens your mind, it can also often be it can take a toll on minority students because a lot of the arguments are not neutral. For example, depending on the case you're discussing, if you're discussing um, Korematsu, which is a case that justified the Japanese internment camps in during World War II, where Japanese people, even American citizens, were sent into concentration camps. If you're like reading that case and someone raises their hand and says like, well, the Japanese internment camps were horrible, but I could see how in a similar situation, maybe this logic makes sense. If someone says that in your class, which by the way happened in our class, and you as a minority student are sitting there and going, well, that's, excuse my French, but that's bullshit because that logic is what got people killed. That logic that people used in courts is what allowed this human rights violation to happen. And maybe you have ancestors that are connected to that, incident, or maybe you just feel that very strongly because of the current political climate or what has been done to like your family in the past or the threat of it all. then you have to raise your hand and you have to say something about it. But but it's not neutral. For that person who just said that thing, they didn't think twice about it. They don't have strong emotions about it. And that's the hard that's like they can say something harmful without even thinking twice about it. But when you're the student who it affects, your heart is racing, you feel tense, you don't feel well, you feel like you're about to go into real confrontation with somebody even though it's supposed to just be like this um like kind of neutral, oh, we're just sharpening our minds kind of discussion. It's never neutral. And um people get heated. And I mean, I don't think anybody's ever gotten like uncivil. That's just very frowned upon, so it doesn't happen. But like you feel real feelings about something. And so I think like I think you have to find people that will have your back, that think about these kinds of issues the same way as you and will have your back. And then also if you can stomach it hard because like I said, it's actually quite difficult to say something. And the problem is the burden is always on you to say something. So the professor doesn't step in and correct because the point is that you're not supposed to correct people's thinking. Rather, people are supposed to have like an open and honest discourse. So if a student says something, it's not the teacher's place to tell them that they're wrong for saying that because they're not in the eyes of the classroom. Rather, it's another student's job to rebut that. Um, so the burden is on that student to say something. And I would say if you can stomach it and you can practice that skill, you should learn how to say something because if no one says something, then it's just like that person gets to say that harmful thing and people leave. And there's plenty of people that don't think that deeply about things. And if one person says something, they're just going to listen to it and not poke at it further. But if somebody else in the class rebuts that point or gives another argument, then they are going to think about it further. And that is a good thing overall. So I would say, yeah, those two things. Find your people who will have your back and also try and be brave enough to say something if you can.
Okay, that's such an excellent argument because especially like in my time, I feel like people in law school be more mature, but if something is heated when it comes to like my sort of people, if something gets heated or something, it's often like seeing that you should just back off and just like let it be. But I'm glad in law school that isn't the case.
Like it's interesting you mentioned that, but when things get heated, like we're told to back off. Like actually the skill that you learn to develop, um, and it's not fair, but like you have to be really cognizant of how you present. So like I'm a woman of color, which means I can't get mad. So I still do anyways, but see, like a man who's white can get like outraged or affronted or upset a little bit in class. So if someone says something, he can be like, "What? How can you say that?" And then like explain his point of view. And nobody really thinks twice about it. But when you look differently and you get upset or you're like, "How can you even say that?" People will attribute it to, oh, you must just be emotional about this, and they don't listen to the argument you're making. Um, and it's unfortunate, but it's not just true in law school too. It's true everywhere else. Like in the courtroom, in front of the judge, in front of other lawyers, like how you present to the world dictates like how you are allowed to react. And you can break that norm. And if you do it successfully and people end up listening to you, then that's a new innovation and you've done that. But when you answer those questions in law school, answering them without getting mad, like you might feel heated, but learning how to answer it in a way that is intellectually sound without showing that you're upset about it, or maybe you show that you're rightfully upset about it because the argument you're making is that intellectually sound. Like if you can do that, and learn that skill in law school, and will help you the rest of your life. I don't think it's fair. I think it's deeply biased, but you have to learn that skill for practice. So I guess it's good. I guess the people that say shitty things are as good practice for law school or the rest of your career.
Yeah, since I do speech and debate and all these debate-oriented things, I often find myself being like, You're kidding. Like, how could you say that?" But then I realize, like, in the big scale of things, I'm fighting for what my values and what matters to me. So it's important. And if people find it emotional, then so be it is what I feel. But now I see how in new light how people actually need to like listen to you and how you need to present yourself with that composure, which is a good thing to say. But
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes you just have to say this is too important, and I'm gonna be a little emotional and emphatic about it. And actually, someone did that once successfully in our school, and it made people really think, like, why did this person get so upset about this thing? And so it can't, I'm not saying you can never show how you feel, and I think that's harmful too, but it's just something that you have to think about when you're deciding how to respond to things.
absolutely. One of the biggest aspects I feel that holds me back and a lot of people back from performing to their best capability is not having the right amount of drive or motivation or willingness to do something. So I have to ask, what motivates you during those long nights and crazy deadlines to really get things done?
That's a good question. And I mean, you had like given me some insight to prepare for this, so you'd share that question with me. And I remember looking at it and being like, honestly, sometimes you just got to get it done.
Mm.
Like I think what I what I have learned in law school as someone who's been a perfectionist for a while, I love doing work that's really good. Like it may take me forever, but it's really good. And I there's nothing that satisfies me more. But what a skill that I've learned in law school is just doing it 70 to 80% good and turning it in. Like when things are really intense and like just long nights, like it's just a lot has to get done. Sometimes there's no motivation. You don't feel like putting in like 100% because you don't have 100% to put in. Like you haven't had a break in a while. So you just have to, if you have something you have to do, you just have to say like, okay, this is my best right now, and you have to just do it. And I mean, like, I don't know. Like I guess that when I do have more to put in, um, I guess what motivates me is like two things, like my passion, I would say like my heart. So like the things that I care really strongly about. But I think you can't just have that because you'll burn out really easily. Have you ever heard of something called compassion fatigue?
No, I haven't.
It's actually, you should look it up after this. It's really
Mhm.
common in healthcare workers and even in like lawyers that do direct services to indigent people. So indigent people are people that can't really pay for services. So if you're like a court-appointed lawyer, you're a lawyer for someone who can't afford those services. And people that do that kind of work or just public interest work in general, what happens with extreme burnout sometimes is if your job requires you to care, so like as a doctor, if you care, you have to care about the patient, you have to care about their comfort. After a while, if you're that burnt out, you lose the capacity to care. So you just don't care. And it can lead to some dangerous outcomes, especially in the healthcare setting. Like there's people that have done malpractice and just given really bad treatment. And it's because they were so burnt out by the system and like the hours they were asked to work that they don't care anymore. So, oh, why did I bring up compassion fatigue? I was gonna say that um like sometimes you just have to be careful not to get to that point. So if you're if you just have a lot of heart for something, it can be really easy to enter that territory because your tendency is to, from the get-go, just like put everything into what you're doing. And you can't put everything into your work. Like at the end of the day, if you want to be able to wake up another day and do what you do to help more people, you have to have that separation between like I might be a law student or a lawyer or whatever, but that's still just one part of me. I can't give everything to that.
Mhm.
And so I would say like what motivates me is my heart, but also my head, because I think you have to find something intellectually challenging too. Like people that are lawyers are people that like using their brain. Like you could have done something else if you didn't. So I think if you find something like interesting, legally or complex and like a juicy little puzzle you want to solve, then that's like a really good motivator too.
Yeah, that's that's okay. I'm at loss for words because that's so different when it comes to like high school and stuff like that, where you have to give 100%, where you have to do this, this, and that. So seeing how you can slowly transition to, again, like you stated, work-life balance and law school is something very like enlightening and exciting to hear. But one thing I always am curious about is law school harder than high school or undergrad, or is it just completely different?
I don't know. I think that depends on the person. Like, I don't know. I think it depends on you and like your life experience at the time. I found law school harder than high school and undergrad, but some people find undergrad easier than high school. And that wasn't necessarily my experience. So I really don't know. I do think it's different. Like, I I think in high school, a lot of the things that you take up are achievable. Like, um, there's a grade that if you work a certain way, you can reach it. And maybe that's changing because I hear things are getting very competitive now. But I remember in my time it was pretty competitive, but at the end of the day, the most you can get is 100 out on a test. And if you study a certain way, like you will get that if you're just willing to put in the time and effort. But undergrad, I found a little bit more difficult because you're given a lot more freedom to choose different things. And I hadn't really had that before in my life. I didn't even know how to exercise it. And yeah, and I don't know, a lot of like we're both kind of from the same community, and a lot of like our Indian parent mindset is to like tightly regulate us. And that has been really helpful. Like that gives us the skills and like that makes sure that we do really well in school. But then in undergrad, like the world is seeing you as an adult, so you're kind of expected to make your own choices a little bit, and nobody has any idea what they're doing. But I think us especially, like maybe every personality is different, but I found I didn't even have like I didn't making my own choices was just so weird to me and foreign to me. I didn't know what to choose. And then in law school, it's just very different because, for example, in high school, I was talking about, well, there's a way you can get 100, and if you figure it out, you can do it. In law school, it's not like that. I think, I don't know, some people feel that it's like that, and that's great for them. But maybe, but like wait, I want to talk about that about that in a bit, but still law school is graded very differently. Like it's graded on a curve. And what that means is if there's like a certain number of A's they can give out.
Mhm.
So it doesn't matter how well you did. If you didn't do, it matters how well you did compared to the other people in your class. So if everybody in your class does really well, like you all really studied very hard, and if it was a numerical grade, you would have made 100 or beyond that, it doesn't matter. The teacher still has to see who did this much better and this much worse. And you could have done like really like like a person who's you could have done as well as somebody who's been practicing for a couple of years, but you still get a B or a B minus. Like, so there's just less of a weight to less of a feeling that you can control your outcomes. So you can't like put 100%. Like you can't calculate if I put in this much effort, then I'll get this much reward. It's just very hard to do that. And I think some people feel that they can, but I personally haven't cracked that code yet. And the reason I think some people just have access to that knowledge. Like they grew up with lawyers in the family and they were exposed to this kind of thinking, and they knew what torts was before they entered law school. I didn't know what a tort was. I'd never heard of that word. And like that, it just gives you such an advantage. I didn't even realize it. I was like, well, I'm a fast learner. I'm sure law is no different. I'll learn it. And that's true. And I'm going to be just as good a lawyer as them. But it matters in terms of like that extra edge you get of like, oh, I know exactly what to do for this class. And I know exactly how to think about it. Whereas the rest of us are learning the material for the first time and thinking about it for the first time. And we don't have that advantage.
Mhm. Do you find like a lot of those type of people who already know like most of the material because their parents are lawyers or grandparents?
Um, I thought when I entered law school, I wouldn't say a lot. I would say it's about 50-50. Like when I entered law school, I thought everyone was like me. I was like, oh, we're all just like new here. And it feels like that because like nobody knows anybody. And we ask like, oh, what did you do for undergrad? And we like learn what everybody did like for undergrad or if they worked. So you know their background and everybody has such various backgrounds. Like, oh, you were in like sports entertainment or you were like in physiotherapy. That's so cool. That's so different. So I was under this assumption that everybody's coming in with this like clean slate. But then like honestly, a year and a half, 2 years into it, I got to know like, oh, that person's mother is like on the Texas Board of Bar Examiners. Like they give the bar exam to people. Oh, that person's dad like runs their own firm in Dallas. Like you just don't know. Like you don't even ask. And I was like, oh, like I guess not everybody is like this. Like people do have people that they know. So, um, yeah, it was more than I expected. I'll say that. And nobody's forthcoming. Everybody's kind of secretive. Um, I would say my law school is better than most highly ranked law schools. Like some of the other ones are just crazy in terms of competition and secrecy. And my law school's pretty like friendly and we all get along for the most part, other than like the tensions that I was talking about. But we're all like polite to each other and we all at some level, mostly like each other. But like people still are a little bit secretive and snaky and they don't really tell you. So like you have to like learn that and you're like, oh, like these people have had a leg up and they're not going to talk about it because it seems kind of crude.
Hmm. That's interesting to hear because I was under the assumption that in law school, like you're learning different views, you're on like cloud nine because all these people's perspectives, but it brings to new light that some people are just like that, I guess. Like I don't know how else to explain it. But yeah,
I think
that
everyone, like you learn to be more like that. Like I think entering law school, I was very like la 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 la. Like I was an open book. Anyone asked me anything, I would tell them because I thought we were all friends. And then later I was like, oh, Archana, you have to be smarter. Like you can't just be telling your whole life story to everybody because not every people, I think in general, I think the world is like this the older you get, but I didn't realize, but I'm like, people don't care about you like that. That's why it's so important to find your community and your people because they do care about you like that, you know?
yeah, that's so true to find relating back to your community and friends. But you talked about how you're going into public interest. How did you find that as your passion and what drew you into it?
Yeah, I mean, so I talked about the Dobbs decision, and so that's why I wanted to go to law school. So I was like, I just want to do this. And it's like there's like discrete things I wanted to do. And like you're asking me this at like an interesting time because I'm trying to apply for jobs now and I'm pivoting a little bit in what I thought I would do. So it's like I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I remember being like, okay, so I'm interested in abortion litigation. And I like wanted to find a job where I was like, I want to litigate abortion cases. Like that's just what I wanted to do. But no job like that really exists because of how the legal world is structured. So there's certain nonprofits that handle abortion litigation, like ACLU or Center for Reproductive Rights, and they they kind of do something called impact litigation, which is they work the case at a high level. So they write these like really nuanced legal arguments and they collaborate with like people in different states. But then they get outside lawyers to go into the courtroom and argue those cases. So they will hire like people from a big law firm that that I guess they're really good at litigation and they'll go in and argue the case. Or if it's a civil case, they'll talk to criminal defense attorneys that are really good at courtroom litigation and they'll collaborate with them. And those people will actually argue the case. Whereas these people would have done the legal research and like built the argument. So there's aren't really people that do everything in the supply chain. It's kind of divided up. So then I was like, okay, I guess I have options of what I want to do. Like, I know that I definitely want to be involved in that world in some way, but do I want to be on the impact litigation side and like maybe the oral argument side or, that side of it? Or do I want to learn courtroom litigation? And I ended up doing a lot of criminal defense internships and stuff because I was interested in courtroom litigation. And I'm also interested in criminal defense. I just find criminal law really, really like interesting, intellectually interesting. So I was like, okay, I could do that. And that's sort of the legal experiences I've been doing because there's nothing that prepares you for courtroom litigation like criminal law. Like, in my opinion, like I think that's just the field of law where you're in the court every day. So, that and most lawyers don't see the courtroom these days. Like, even if you're in litigation, like you're not going to trial. Even in criminal law, you don't go to trial like every day or anything. Um, so that's what I've kind of been doing. But also I'm interested in civil law and I had an internship this summer where I was like, "Oh, I would like to, be part." It was like a health law internship and I was like, "I would like to do this someday." But the people that work there had gone through like big law or something similar where they did a lot of like civil courtroom stuff or civil litigation. And that's how they got there. So I'm like, okay, I don't know. I would like to do something where I can sort of build all those skills. Um, but either way, like I know that public interest law is going to be a part of my practice. I no longer know if that's going to be like the job that I take because it people will go to like nonprofits or they'll go to like legal aid or something like that or like a public defender's office. Um, some of these nonprofits that do impact litigation like ACLU, that's public interest. So people do that. I might do that. And that's sort of how I've been gearing my entire law school experience. But now there's like other options that are open to me. Either way, my mission remains the same. Like I want to be able to either now or later in my career, like help the average person like live a better life.
It just came to light like how many different law career pathways, how many different like you said big law, you said public interest, criminal. I never knew there were so many, which is great that you mentioned that. But now it's time for all our viewers, like we now you get to give us some advice. What advice would you give someone who's thinking to apply to law school someday?
Um, I don't know if I'm the best person because I kind of just applied. I would say just apply. Actually, that's my advice. Um, yeah, it doesn't cost anything. That's a lie, actually. There's a hefty application fee, but you can get it waived if you qualify. And if you are thinking about it, and maybe your calm is like, oh, but I don't know exactly what I would do, but it really, really, really interests me. I would say apply. Because if you're not in that world, it's really hard to know exactly what you would do, but that doesn't mean that the experience won't be valuable. And that doesn't mean that you wouldn't make a good lawyer because I mean, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. And even lawyers, like I said earlier, like lawyers tend to shift in their career a lot, actually. So like even lawyers don't know what they're going to be doing 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So I would say that like just apply and I think there's also lots of like people online and stuff that's saying like, well, don't go to law school of this because it's a waste and it's a lot of money. And I mean that's true, like it is a lot of money, so think about it carefully. But as long as you do your research, and that means not talking to or not going online on the Reddit threads, like go on the Reddit threads, but talk to real people. Like try as much as you can to like network and find that person. And I guess if you're watching this, like I hope this has been helpful to you in some way. But I would say like apply. And I honestly think that there's so much diversity in the law that if any part of it interests you, you can find something you like. But some people, like, they say it's not worth it or they can't find what they like because of other factors. For example, maybe what they like to do doesn't line up with the salary they would like to get. Like, those are all factors. You should look into salary, like work-life balance, try to talk to people in those fields. But at the end of the day, like I think there's just such a wide variety that if you're truly interested in one or two aspects of it, you can find a career that's really fulfilling to you. And and it doesn't hurt to apply. You can always decide not to go later. So I would say just talk to as many people as you can and just apply.
That's great advice. Like, just do it, just apply. And I feel in many other professions, there's not many things you can do, but in law, it's great that there's so many professions or so many pathways that is catered to your personality and many different things that you said. But through all the events that are happening right now in the world, many lawyers, people in the legal field, just people in general, hope to create like a change or some sort of difference. So, how do you hope to make a difference through your legal career?
Wow, that is a big question. Um, you know what? Like, I don't know. I
Mhm.
don't know. I think I like it's interesting. I started law school when I was 23 and now I'm 25, so my frontal lobe has fully developed, so I'm a different person. And I think about things differently. And I think when I was 23, I was like, oh, like I'm gonna do this kind of litigation and I'm gonna like change this law because all that's all the reason it hasn't changed is because they haven't met me. Like they haven't met my arguments. And I think I'm glad I had that zeal and I think maybe I should keep more of it. But who I am now, like, and what I've seen, that's not exactly the reality. Like there's deep-seated institutional ideologies. Those are the reasons like things don't change. Those are the reasons things are changing for the worse. Um, but I think what I'm going to do is just be the best lawyer I can be. And I'm somebody that I think it's important to have a very well developed sense of morality and ethics. It's different for different people, but I think that it's important to me that I know what I believe is right and what I believe is wrong. And I'm going to practice law in a way that I think is right. And so it's probably the small things. Like I don't think you can set out to be a great lawyer. Um, People sometimes ask me like, "Oh, are you gonna be a Supreme Court judge?" And I think they're half joking, but also I think they don't understand because I didn't understand that having that kind of a goal is nearly impossible. It's like setting out to be the president. You can go into politics, you can go into local politics, you can maybe try for national politics, but those are the kinds of things you can never determine if that's what you're going to do. Um, and so I think it's really hard to say that you're going to make this sort of big change. But what I can do is do my job well. So, for example, if I were to go into public defense, criminal defense, that means that I keep attorney-client privilege, even though people might ask questions or pressure me into telling something that my client said to me. That can mean that I fight for my client. So even if somebody's giving me an like I don't want to use a lot of jargon, but if somebody is like pressuring me to take the easy way, I can say, no, my client has these constitutional rights and I'm going to utilize them and make you work for this and put you to the task of your legal burden. And it's all legal, but like really just upholding the law And if I think the law is unfair, making small arguments that can then maybe eventually change the law. Um, I think those are ways that I would practice. I just want to say, like, I know I don't want to, keep rambling on, but I
Yeah.
think as a lawyer, your sense of activism is different. Um, if as like a street activist, you go out into the street and you protest and you do all of these different strategies and tactics, and that's necessary and that's needed for that. But as an attorney, like that's not really your role. And people have said that to me, and I haven't really felt that I didn't like that because I was like, no, but just because I decide to be an attorney, like I shouldn't have my right to protest taken away from me. And maybe that's true, but that's not how you fight as an attorney. As an attorney, you can't just break the law because you think it's wrong. Unfortunately, that's how you get your bar license taken from you. So you have to work within the law. But what you can do is do well-researched creative legal arguments. Say the law might be written this way, but it should actually be interpreted this way. Like push the needle every time and show up, and whoever your client is, if you're working with the client directly, like show them that you care about them and that you're there for them. Because for a lot of people in public interest legal work who work with indigent clients, that's the first time somebody's ever been on their side. So it's just really important to show up every day and do the small things and do your job, your little role in the whole cog of the system to the best of your ability. And that's how I hope to make a change someday in the future.
That's such a great answer. I remember when I was like third grade, fourth grade, I would tell my parents, I'm gonna be a Supreme Court judge. But now as I'm getting older, I'm like, oh, like it's not that easy. Like that's not like something that you can just do. And like you said, I don't know is a perfectly good answer because right now in the world, a lot of our answers are, I don't know, I'm not sure. So for our last question, um, you always say that community is the strongest. So what do you feel as a community, as like a law group in general? How do you think that law students or any young person can help in social justice issues?
Yeah, there's a lot of like movement right now with that. I think law students, like in my school, I see it, law students collaborating with interest groups that protest. For example, like maybe the ACLU will come give a presentation on um not and a group did come to school. I can't remember which group it was, but they came to our school and told us like this is how we should do know your rights presentations for protests. Like what are your rights during a protest? What are your rights if ICE decides to enter this facility or whatever, or enter your school? Like, what are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? And I actually, so I was also the president of If, When, How, which is the reproductive justice legal organization in my school, and they have chapters across many law schools too. So hopefully you go to law school and you're convinced, and hopefully you join If, When, How. And an important part of what we did this year was Know Your Rights presentations. Because abortion law in Texas has been changing so rapidly, we would update our presentation and go into different community spaces and tell people like what the law is. So some of the more impactful presentations we did was, well, to our own law school, but we also presented to women who were formerly incarcerated. And we sort of tailored our presentations to what that means for women who might still be incarcerated. And we also gave our presentation to an organization that works with youth. See, previously in Texas, there was this process called judicial bypass, where if a minor wanted to get an abortion, normally they would need their parents' permission. But if they're wanting to get an abortion despite their parents, they could go to a judge and apply for one. But now, like minors are just left with no options almost. So there's people advocating for them, and we gave our presentation to them. We also spoke to the local undergraduate students and the medical students because a lot of medical students going into practice don't know and are scared of what kind of drugs and treatment they're allowed to administer to their patients. So we're just doing our best to like give knowledge to people and also just shed light on certain issues. And even though, like I said, like people lost or lawyers, street protesting isn't really the way our tradition necessarily. Law students protest, and that has been a thing. And also, law students can learn more about the subject. And again, it's about being creative. The law does might be bad and it might say this, but there's always something, some way in which if you're creative enough, you can think of it in a different light and maybe do something that's helpful to some. Say just like if you care enough about something, getting into community with other people and deciding to do something about it, whether that be educating yourself, educating other people, or trying to make a statement to your local community, like your school or the workplace you're at, those are all things that you can do as a young person.
That's a great answer because many of us feel lost in a time like this or in time in general. So your answer was perfect to guiding people that way. But this marks the end. Archana, thank you so, so much for sharing your journey with us. Your story was super helpful, and I know a lot of students, especially me, my peers, are going to be incredibly inspired by it. To everyone listening, thanks for hanging out with both of us. If you like this episode, don't forget to follow or subscribe and check out this exact video on YouTube at Lawfully Told Podcast. See you later. Bye.